Welcome to Capsized, a Silver Lake podcast talking about weekly school-wide updates.
Welcome back to Capsized.
Yay!
Hi.
Yay! I'm Emerson,
I'm Jake.
And I'm Hayden.
and today's Monday. So
It's Monday.
it's May 1st,
First day of May.
Yeah.
5/1/23. It's an
Finally.
interesting date. Sounds like a lunch pin number, but
A lunch. It does sound like a lunch pin. My lunch pin is 7-8.
Not a lot going on this week.
Yeah.
Oh, prom tickets are on sale.
Yeah.
I think tomorrow's the last.
Tomorrow's
day
the last day, though.
so,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Better have gotten them.
So yeah, $85. Check or cash.
Yay.
Yay! That's so expensive. Anyway, anything to add for this week, Hayden?
Oh, yes, the class of 2026 is having a raffle. If you enter in the raffle, you could win 2 tickets to a Red Sox game.
Mhm.
It's against Tampa Bay on June 4th.
That's fun.
Yeah. And if you don't win that, there's also a chance that you can win a $50 Visa gift card. So,
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll do the
Ooh.
raffle.
Very cool.
yeah.
All right. So let's see what else is coming up. Seniors are graduating in just a couple of days. Not a couple of days. Couple of weeks. Like 3 weeks, I think.
Lucky ducks.
Yeah, we still have a while. We have like 31 days of school left, I think. So
That's so annoying.
it's not that bad.
Later today on the show, we are having some of our school's English teachers coming on,
Mm-hmm.
and they're going to talk books. So that'll be fun. That's a little later. Our word of the day, week, month, whatever you want to call it, is foppish. Foppish. It means, okay, you can say, if someone is always super concerned with how their outfit looks, you can say, or you can refer to them as foppish.
Ooh, that's interesting.
So, yeah, I guess it's like kind of like vain, right?
A vein? All right, yeah. And now we have with us
Ms. Ritchie from the English department.
Yay!
Woo!
We're happy to have some guests on
I
here.
know it's been a while. Was the last person Mr. Weber?
Yeah, last year.
Oh, then I'm in very good company.
Yes. So we have an English teacher on here so we can talk about book curriculums. And we'd love to hear your opinions on that, Ms. Ritchie.
All right. Well, I know you guys have been talking about, the idea that like, my parents and grandparents read some of these same books. Why don't they change it up a little bit? And, so I sort of want to respond to that a little bit. I definitely see the value in adding new books to the curriculum because I do think it's important for students to read things that were written in this century, and that they read things where they see some of their own lives and experiences
Definitely.
reflected. I think that's
Yes.
really important because I think that can spark a love of reading for maybe somebody who didn't expect to love reading. So I think that's a really important experience. But I want to make sure students don't just automatically equate old with outdated, crappy, not worth reading, because, the reason some of those books have hung on all these years and keep getting read is that they have really valuable ideas and universal themes that are part of humanity, no matter what, century it is and no matter what, your situation is. I think when I hear students sometimes say, oh, I don't see myself in, say, To Kill a Mockingbird, I feel like, I think you're missing something here and you're lacking imagination, because if you don't see yourself in a child who learns that, oh, wow, crappy stuff happens in the world and I'm really upset about that, and now I have to find a way to deal with that. If you don't see yourself in that character, you're lacking the imagination to do so, because I think, it's a little bit reductive to say like, because I'm not growing up in the Jim Crow South in the 1930s, or, because times have gotten a little better in regards to, race and class and our culture, then I don't see this in, us or our culture anymore. First of all, I think, things have gotten better, but we still have things to talk about race and class and a lot of other things. Yeah.
Yeah.
But also just that idea that we all go through that process of loss of innocence and learning like, the world isn't as nice as my parents told me it was. And how do I then deal with that?
I definitely agree. And
Yes.
I think in the instance of To Kill a Mockingbird, I think like my biggest issue with us still reading it, and I definitely agree with the whole idea of the loss of innocence. I think that's super important, and I think we can all connect to that. I think that like my experience was that it wasn't being it wasn't being like taught in the way that the loss of innocence was the main theme of it. It was being taught that the racism was the main theme of it, which obviously it's a huge part of that book, and it's the whole book. And I just think that like you said, obviously racism is still a huge issue today. I mean, we're better, but we're not. We could be better.
Absolutely. We could be a lot better.
We could be a lot better. And I just think that a lot of the time I hear like, oh, this is the way like the language was at this time. And I feel like that puts a message that it's not like that anymore when people still use that language and it's still very prevalent in today's society. So I think that's just my biggest issue is just the way it's presented.
I agree that, I mean, I think if any teacher is accidentally sending the message that, oh, we're over this now, that's accidental, and we're always rushing through stuff and trying to address everyone's needs and questions. And so, I think that is maybe accidental, or maybe we're not understanding how you hear it when we present it. So, that's something that we can think about. I definitely think that what we should be doing as educators is, if we are reading older books about older times, I agree with you, we should not present these as if it's like, oh, but we're past that now. But we should be asking the critical thinking questions about like, okay, so what elements of this do you see
in today's
in your community, in your school? And I mean, I think really we should always be connecting books to our own experiences, because that's the reason why we read. We read because it's about humanity, and we're part of humanity, and we can still see this in ourselves, in our classmates, in our, in the people we're around. So I think, maybe teachers need to think about better questions to ask. None of us should be just asking for recall, and none of us should be asking, well, what happened in chapter 11? Because I always tell my students, I don't care if you remember this book specifically in 10 years. I care if you remember, that we talked about issues that pertain to your society, that your life, and that you can take the thinking we did and apply it in the future. Not so much, remember, what the plot of the book was.
Definitely.
It should be a springboard.
Yeah, I definitely agree with a lot of the stuff that you were saying. And I personally don't share this opinion, but I know a lot of students think that, or don't see the value in reading even further back literature, like Shakespeare, for an example. What would you say to those people who don't understand the value in that? And I think, to your point, it's harder to relate to something like Shakespeare because of how old it is, and especially because it's like you're reading in a totally different language. It's like you're reading in a totally different world. So how do you apply Shakespeare to the modern world?
Well, it's a really good question, actually. Well, first of all, back to universal themes. Shakespeare understood people, and he understood, humanity, and he understood our, all the wonderful things we have, but also all the foibles we have too. So I think, there's still a lot of universal themes and situations that you see that, update that, stick that in, 2023. Oh, that's still happening. People still have those conflicts. People still have those ways of relating to one another. In terms of the language, I try to approach it like, I tell my kids it's a good story, but also I try to approach it like it's a puzzle, like it's logic, like it's not even English really, like, wrestling with something that is hard, or wrestling with something that like you're not comfortable with, is a valuable exercise no matter what you're doing with. So if you're doing that with a math problem, if you're doing that with something in history, if you're doing that with a tough text that you have to wrestle through, it's all part of learning to be a thinker and stretching yourself and saying, I'm okay with things that are not in my comfort zone, because all of you are going on to adult lives, whether those include college or technical school or the military or a job, and you're always going to have to wrestle with something that is, I'm not familiar with this, I don't know this, what do I do about that? So I think it's like an academic exercise, to decode the language.
Yeah,
I definitely like that that idea of using the language as a I can't think of the word.
So kind of moving off onto a different topic. I remember how you said that some kids are turned away from reading because all the books that they're being forced to read are like written like the 1900s and like even like Shakespeare and stuff like that. So I had a teacher a few years back say that all kids love to read. They just haven't found the right books yet.
Oh my God, I say that to my students too.
Okay, so I'm gonna say, like, do you like agree with that? And do you think that the stuff we're reading in schools is kind of turning away kids from books at like a young age? Because like in fifth grade we're being forced to read like
The Pearl.
Yeah, The Pearl. And
well, I don't think The Pearl's appropriate for the 5th grade, so I would hope
or like
that's more like middle school.
Yeah.
But
I read it in 8th grade.
Yeah.
8th grade, yeah.
Mm-hmm. But like, do you agree that like some of these books like turning kids away from reading?
That's a really good question, actually, and I think I'm not sure it's the books themselves, but I do think that the way you're being taught reading in the early grades turns a lot of kids off early because your very well-meaning and excellent elementary school teachers, have an MCAS to teach to, and it, says something about whether they're doing their jobs right, and they do get anxious about it, and they have bosses too. So I think the amount of standardized testing has changed the way we teach.
Definitely.
And, when we have to teach that way, we don't get to let you guys do as many creative things with writing. We're now like, oh, we have to write the 4th grade MCAS essay, or creative, choose your own book and fall in love with it, because it's like, oh, we have to use these informational texts to teach this MCAS skill. So I think it's not necessarily the books we're handing you that are the problem, but it's the structure. It's the structure of education right now. You guys are in an educational moment where this is what we're doing, and we'll probably change it at some point, because we always change it, because my parents were educated differently than I was educated differently than they were. You guys are a new generation, then this is what you got. So I think kids could fall in love with any book. I'll just give you an example. Like back in the day when I was falling in love with reading, there wasn't such a wide range of young adult literature. Like people didn't write as much specifically for you. So our choices were fewer, and they were the same choices like, say, my parents had. And I still managed to fall in love with reading because there were good books and good stories, And I think now kids should be able to even more fall in love with reading because you have such a wider range of choices. You just have to find them. And someone like Mrs. Matthias, who is so excellently qualified to connect people with things they might love, and is so knowledgeable. She's like a really good resource. And I wish more people would come to the library and be open-minded to, hey, that idea that Hayden just said, that, you just might not have found the right book yet. That makes you go, oh, now I get why people read.
Come to the library.
Come to the library.
Go to the library. I just have one last question. Do you think that, or how would you go about incorporating new books with similar ideas, or would you do it by grade? Would you put beginning of literature be or would you go an older book that surrounds the idea of racism in America and then have them read a modern book? How would you go about it?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to have kids reading more books, but we've only got so much school year, right? I think the curriculum should probably have a balance of some older and newer, and a wide variety of voices. We've traditionally heard from a lot of white male dead voices, and we'd like to. And I think, to be fair, the Silver Lake English department has done a good job, and we've been supported by our administration in over the past few years adding books to the curriculum. It's definitely different than the curriculum I started teaching with in 1998. So we're making progress. That said, I think reading multiple kinds of experiences within a year is a way to go. I think pairing texts is a way to go, that if you're reading an older something, reading some modern articles that go along with it on this is how this is functioning in, modern day America, and having you guys debate that, talk about that, that paired, let's see how that translates to the modern world is a good idea. A lot of our teachers are doing some really interesting work with units that actually allow you to select your own text. So that's something we're developing right now, and trying to see how will that work? How can teachers make sure you're still doing the reading and getting a quality experience, but still allowing you to choose something that grabs your attention. So, and I think summer reading is a good way to do that, but we all know everybody doesn't do that. So, let's be realistic. They're not all going to read over the summer, but we're trying to encourage them to find something. I always tell my kids, smart people are always reading something, and I don't care what it is. If you're reading the news, if you're reading, Car and Driver magazine because you love, automotive stuff, or if you're reading a novel or a nonfiction thing, just read something, find out something beyond your own little life and beyond your own little phone screen, please, begging you.
Last year I did a unit with that. We got to choose our own memoirs, and it was the one I chose. I wasn't in love with it. I thought the writing was a little iffy. Not iffy, it just wasn't my favorite book, but it was still interesting, and it was one of the better, I think, units of the year. I liked a lot of the stuff that we did, but I liked that you were able to have a little bit more independence in that. Yeah. And I wanted to read the Michelle Obama memoir.
Oh yeah, Becoming.
Yeah. It was kind of on my list, but I never got around to it. Unfortunately, there wasn't a copy available, so I didn't get it, but it's fine. I just like the fact that for me, I struggle to motivate myself to read. So in a world where you get to choose what books you get to read and then apply that to school, it's really nice, because then you're forcing yourself to do something that you've wanted to do for a long time. You just haven't have the motivation to do.
Yeah. And I think that's, I mean, we're just definitely still working with all of this about how, how do we motivate kids who have abundant distractions and phones in their hands and, 1,000 things to do, to still sit down and read something of value every once in a while. Because I think it's important. I think it's important to recognize that if you don't have time to read for pleasure during the year because you are keeping up with schoolwork, pick up a book of your choice during a break. That's a good time to say, hey, what do I want to do? And maybe I'd find the book, like you said, the book, like Hayden said, that the book that maybe that's the one that will teach me that I do love to read, actually. No, it's hard. Kids have been turned off since 3rd, 4th, 5th grade doing all this like test prep.
We talked about the turning away from reading just because there's not a lot of time.
Yeah.
And we talked about that last time. Just we have, 7 other classes all giving us, the same amount of work. We all have work over break. There's projects. I mean, Jake and I this year had to write 2 research papers at the same time, and they were due the same week.
Wow,
mine are on the same day.
That's
the
rough.
same. And it's a different topic. I don't know, but I just think that like just the whole, I don't know. I just think the time is like a huge problem because I grew up without a TV and I love to read and I don't have any time to do it.
Yeah, I've heard some of my kids who are still pleasure readers say that too. Like, I love to read. It's just that, where do I fit that in? So, and these are all, thank you for inviting me on, because hearing what you're saying, helps me think as a teacher, like, okay, so how can we provide that space for kids if they want it? And how can we better interest the kids who don't think they want it? Because, maybe they'll find out they do. I mean, just because you've hated reading since 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, it's really hard to get kids back when they already have it in their minds. They don't love reading. But I'm hoping we can find a way to maybe get some kids to return to, like, give it another chance. Maybe I do like reading. So, but you're right. I hear what you're saying about the time pressures. That's but thank you. You're helping me as an educator. So.
Speaking of time, I think that's all we have time.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you
so much.
Oh no, thank you for inviting me.
We really appreciate your input. And it's really nice to
Yes.
hear from someone on the other side of the gate. So
And likewise.
have a good week, and we will see you on the flip side.